Okay, I've got a message telling me that the Hangout is live. Let me go see if people can see my screen. And two are watching. Do you mind maybe dropping a chat in there to let me know if you can hear me? All right, it says there are three people here now. Just let me know if you can hear me. That's just important because I oftentimes do a whole lot of talking and forget to turn the microphone on or something. Can you hear me? All right, I will turn on this microphone and get some feedback. All right, sounds like we're good to go. So this is what I want to do. I've given you a link in the description box to pretty much most of the out of print books that I've been accumulating over the past couple years. Um, I became interested lately uh, in this Samuel Robotham book, Zetetic Astronomy. I haven't read it. I've looked through it. I've been hearing some videos recently of, I guess it's Eric Dubay reading from this book. I think a lot of people refer to this book. So what I did, I've been collecting a lot of these PDFs over time. I just dropped them into a folder and I went back and just tagged or put the publishing date at the beginning of the title or at the beginning of the file name anyway, so that I've got these books sorted, roughly around the year. Um, because what I was interested to find out is what was being published around the time Samuel Robotham published his Zetetic Astronomy, and what would have been available to him to read and possibly reference in his book to basically refute it or explain it away. I know he does mention some things like that the horizon always rises to your eye level. And I've never found that to be true. And if you look at my videos, you'll see a lot of photographic evidence that that's not true. And then it gets explained away, saying, well, because of perspective, things drop in the distance. Well, which is it? Does the horizon rise to your eye level, or does it drop away because of perspective? It can't be both, can it? So anyway, I've got some of these books open too. I'm gonna refer to them, but first, I'll just show you that it starts in 1807 with studies in terrestrial refraction, and that's the earliest book I happen to have. You can go back earlier if you want to. I'm just making available to anybody that wants to start reading these things. You can download all this stuff right out of the folder that I've linked in the description box. So there it is. 1849 is when he published that book. And then in, what is it, 65, there's this book called Earth Not a Globe. And then when is it? It's a little bit later. Let me just jump over and make sure you can see this. Okay, good. It's coming through. no problem. I don't plan to be on here very long. I just want to really kind of do a quick rundown. Okay, here it is. 1893, Gleason publishes his book. So you can see what would have been available to him to reference or explain away. I mean, obviously he can't be right if these guys are right. If these guys are wrong, he should be able to show that. I think a lot of these books just make blatant claims. You know, the sun does this, the horizon rises to eye level. They just state these things, but they provide no evidence or measurement to back that up. So, again, I'm going to show you some of these books in a minute, but I'm just kind of running down. This is in the late 1800s. 1906, this book is published by Butterfield that I talk about often only because it's an easy read. It is not highly technical. It's really almost like a pamphlet going through all the history of the geodetic surveying campaigns that were done around the world. It's a good one to look at. And it's a good jumping off point. You can read this book and then start looking into some other things. There's a lot of technical information in here. The eastern oblique arc of the United States and the Scotland spheroid. This is a report on a whole lot of triangulation that was done. So there are reports in here. There are manuals on leveling and hydrographic surveying and railroad surveying. There's a lot of information in here in this folder. Most of it's all geodesy, geodetic surveying, that type of thing. Yeah, just all, and it's all in here sorted by date. This is an interesting book, the civil boundaries. I've been mentioning this in the last couple videos I've done, especially when I was discussing with Chris Van Matre, the whole idea of like the boundaries of the United States, and he's out west. Are these things accurate or not? You can't have it both ways. You cannot dismiss surveying and say, well, there's problems with the instruments and there's problems with what perspective does and so forth. I mean, I've done what I can do to separate the two, what things look like in the distance, but our ability to still measure them. Obviously, mountains are very far away, and they've been triangulated and the elevations determined and plotted on maps. I'm starting to get repetitive with this. And quite honestly, I'm like moving away from debunking flat Earth. It's not even interesting anymore. I'm actually getting more interested in astronomy. I never really looked into astronomy personally. I've not owned a expensive telescope. I've looked through telescopes, but I'm going to start researching how they measured, the distance to the moon, to the sun, and if anybody wants to join in with me on some fun projects like that, that's what I want to start doing, is researching how that was done long ago, and maybe play around doing some of that. So that's where my interest is taking me now, and this then this can become an open source investigation for people that want to look at these early flat Earth Bibles. You could refer to them as, because much of what you hear from the flat Earth is coming out of Robotham's book. And then, do some reading and investigation on what was available to him at his time and cross-reference these things. So here's some of the books that I do have open. Let's see. I started, with the There's his book, Zetetic Astronomy. What's interesting here is about midway down, he says, Earth is not a globe, being the substance of a paper read before the Royal Astronomical Society on the evening of December the 8th, 1848. That would be interesting to find out if he actually did present this and how it was received. Just because it says it there doesn't necessarily mean it actually happened. So if you're interested in researching some of the history and the sources for where all this flat Earth information comes from, this is the earliest book that I found. And it'd be interesting to find out if he actually did make that presentation. Then in 1865, this comes out, Zetetic Astronomy, Earth Not a Globe. All right. And then 1881 is another version of this book. Then, oops, sorry about that. I want to touch that one. Let's see here. This one here, the Gleason book. I have not looked into these people. I don't know if Gleason knew Robotham. I have no idea. Did they correspond? They seem to be talking about the same sort of things, maybe. So again, I'm not claiming to have read all these books. I'm just sharing these things, and maybe some folks can look into it. Maybe somebody might post links to additional papers or additional information, articles written about these folks. I'd love to see a little bit more. Okay, so now I've opened some of the books that were published around the time that Robotham was alive and Gleason was alive. Practical Geodesy, comprising chain surveying. Chain is how they measured distances in those days, before steel tapes and certainly before electronic distance measuring equipment, and certainly way before GPS. So this is a book comprising chain surveying and the use of surveying instruments, leveling and tracing of contours, together with trigonometrical, colonial, mining, and maritime surveying. And that was 1846. Here's a book from 1850, outline of the method of conducting a trigonometrical survey. And that's another way of saying triangulation. And this was done for the formation of geographical and topographic maps and plans, military reconnaissance, leveling, etc., with the most useful problems in geodesy and practical astronomy. Boy, they sure had some long titles. And formula for and tables for facilitating their calculation. 1850. 1845, Practical Astronomy and Geodesy, including the projections of the sphere and spherical trigonometry. Just a few of these that I opened, and again, they're all available to you in the link below once this gets published after this hangout. 1873. This is interesting. A history of the mathematical theories of attraction. I guess that's referring to, gravitation, and the figure of the Earth from the time of Newton to that of Laplace. And this is in 2 volumes. I just have 1 volume open. That's 1873. 1881, just prior to Gleason, this book would have been most likely in print in his time. The Figure of the Earth, An Introduction to Geodesy, 1881. Here's just one of the reports you can get. I just opened one of them. This is a report to the superintendent of the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey showing the progress of the work. And you can get one of these for every year. All right, so you read these books and it talks about all of the triangulation and surveying that had been going on across the country. And I apologize to folks anywhere else in the world. This is kind of a United States centric uh, accumulation of materials, but I do have some from Canada and Australia and other places, and Great Britain. So you can certainly delve in and do some similar research like this for whatever country you live in. Now I've got two books on instruments, surveying instruments, early books. Here's 1890. I thought these would be interesting because of what some of the claims being made about the faultiness or the need to talk to your instrument to tell it what it's looking at. Why? Because it doesn't know what it's looking at. Some of the more silly statements being made. But hey, here's a book on surveying and leveling instruments, theoretically and practically described for construction, qualities, selection, preservation, adjustments, and uses, with other apparatus and appliances used by civil engineers and surveyors. That was 1890. This is an interesting book here. This is 1900. It is a book describing the principal arcs of the meridian and parallels and the oblique arcs. Now, obviously, this is a hugely exaggerated oblate spheroid, but you get the idea that this book is describing the work that was done to triangulate along this meridian and across this parallel. Because they were doing this at a time where they did not know really they understood generally the shape of the Earth, but they didn't have it. They didn't have the real dimensions for an arc, for a degree of arc, and so they set out and performed the triangulation survey in India. Here's a meridian. Here's a couple of parallels of arc. Here we go in Europe. And this is probably going to be the Lapland survey up in here. And not shown is what the work done in Peru. So I'll just page down here so you could see this cover. This is from 1900, the transcontinental triangulation and the American arc of the parallel. All right. So that's 1900. 1906, of course, the book I like to refer people to just because of its ease and it's a quick read. 1926. Now here's another book on surveying instruments. This is Jesse Ramsden. He's a famous instrument maker, and I'm going to definitely look into this book. It's probably going to go through and talk about the methods used to. One of the books I should have included was The History of Angle Measurement. I think that's in my listing. But anyway, this dividing engine is the thing used to create the plates that would be inscribed with the angles, degrees, minutes, and seconds, and how you go about reading those values. This is probably, oh yeah, this is the map. Back in the 60s and 70s, as more technology became available, especially the ability to measure distances electronically, they began to realize that the triangulation could be improved upon. Basically, to do triangulation, they had to measure lots and lots of baselines, and they could only measure them about a few miles in length using steel tapes or wooden rods, even way back. But once distance measuring was able to be done electronically with lasers, and infrared instruments, they decided to set out and measure these lines of traverse across the country. So this was called the TCT, the Transcontinental Traverse, and this is probably one of the coolest surveying projects ever undertaken, in my view. These were all done from towers, probably 10 to 50 feet in the air, and they were measuring 10 miles forward and 10 miles backward, and every other, or every maybe fourth or fifth station was observed for azimuth, latitude, and longitude. Just threw that in here too. All right, so as we're coming up through the years, I've also included a lot of the books and publications on refraction, studies of refraction. Here's one: refraction influence analysis, an investigation on automated elimination of refraction effects on geodetic measurements. I threw in this email correspondence that I had gotten from Charlie Glover. That's Charlie right there looking through Big Red. This is the work they did measuring some very, very long lines down in Texas. So these are retroreflectors. They were measuring, this one was 70K right there, 70 kilometers. So, okay, there's that. That's in there. And then, of course, I've included the report that goes along with that. And that was back in 1978. So there it is. It's in the listing. And then just jumping forward in time to 2014, this is a manual on the geocentric datum of Australia, their technical manual. Excellent geodetic division over there. Anyway, that's what I wanted to show you. Closing all those. And so there you go, from early 1800s all the way up through, and you can, you'll at some point you start to see mentioning of satellites in the 60s and 70s, and then of course by 1989 is publication on the accuracy standards and specifications for doing GPS in a geodetic sense, not a hiker or not just for general navigation purposes, but for high order survey purposes. I think that's it. That's really all I wanted to do with this quick video. Hopefully it's quick. And paging down here. International Laser Ranging Service. Anyway, I hope somebody takes an interest, downloads some of this material. And again, the reason here is the reason I'm sharing this now is to see who may want to collaborate or look into Samuel Robotham and Gleason at their time, the books that were available to them. Again, I'm interested to find, I do want to look into and find out how those books were received in those days. I mean, you figure we've got the flat Earth resurging now in these last few years. They're still looking at that same material, and the question is, why would you do that when there's so much information available to show you that it's utter nonsense? And I come at this from strictly a surveying point of view. It's just ridiculous. And you know what I'll do is show you. I guess I'll just go to my flat Earth group on Facebook. This is my pinned post. And you know, this is where I stand with this. All distances, all elevations, all locations are now and always have been determined by surveyors, making the measurements and producing the maps to plot those locations. The appeal I read from flat earthers is for us to return to a basic fundamental that we can trust in order to make evaluations to reach conclusions. Yet when observations and measurements are presented, the flat earthers protest and complain and discount that evidence as flawed in one way or another. For instance, you know, the horizon always rises to eye level, but I've lots of pictures in this group showing you that that's not the case. So then the answer is there's always an answer. There's always a reason. The answer is that perspective causes things to drop in the distance. So I consider that to be disingenuous, it's insincere, and it's unproductive. You can't have it both ways. If you accept everything you see around you as being really where it is, and you rely on maps and nautical charts or electronic maps and charts on your phone or other device, then you must accept the surveying measurements made to create those maps and charts and the shape of the Earth. Those measurements reveal to the Earth to be spherical. So research geodesy, and then I give the link to that book there. Now I'm giving you a link to much of the material I have. I've got more, and I've got other stuff, but all of that just kind of falls into one category. So there it is. I think I'll just end it here, and look forward to seeing the comments below, and have a good day. See you later.